Afternoon, all. I'm Krishna Mukherjee from ETH. Once again, welcoming you to the Economic Times live webinar powered by IBM. Thank you all for joining in. So, have you designed your incident response plan well? If not, beware. According to a study, about 77% of organizations do not have a cyber security response plan. The study says when it comes to withstanding and recovering from a cyber attack, companies who can respond quickly and efficiently to contain a cyber attack within 30 days save over $1 million on the total cost of a data breach on an average. Ladies and gentlemen, keeping in mind the rising significance of a robust incident response plan, we have designed today's webinar, How to Take Your Incident Response to the Next Level. And for a deep dive into incident response, we have with us today Harjinder S. Thakkar, Solution Design Lead, ISA, IBM Security Services. Thank you, Harjinder, for joining in. Welcome. Before I hand it over to him, I would request you all to be please present till the end of the webinar and answer polls and feedback. Also visit webinar website for detailed terms and condition. Thank you. Over to you, Harjinder. We have already crossed 100 attendees today, 100 plus it is. So Harjinder, that's quite exciting. Like I believe that incident response plan is going to be a very exciting topic today. Over to you. Thank you.
Hey, thank you so much, Krishna. Thank you everybody for taking time out and attending this particular session. I'm going to be taking you through the next 45 minutes on incident response and how do you transform the same. You can go ahead and ask in questions as you think of them during the course of these 45 minutes or at the end of this particular session. Uh, Let me know if all of y'all can see the screen. If anybody has a challenge, please put it on the chat window. I hope that you all are able to see the screen and the agenda. We'll be covering these topics today over the course of the next 45 minutes. So the changing landscape, I think all of us realize that threats have changed over a period of time and the mechanisms that we were using in the past, which were more perimeter driven, are no longer applicable to the current scenario. This is, of course, a reflection of the fact that our businesses have changed, our business models have changed, the manner in which we deploy applications, and the underlying infrastructure for them have changed. As a result of that, the techniques that we were using in the past are no longer sufficient to be able to deal with the attacks of today. Given this particular thought process, a lot of organizations across the world have spent time attempting to understand how should the responses to these change, or what are the different ways in which we should work, what are the different phases that our solution should encompass. Over the course of this seminar, we will touch upon incident response and a small part of it on incident recovery as well. We'll also go in very brief on the phases that precede this. This is the attack chain that has become very popular, and it has aligned us to think in this particular manner whenever we are thinking of the strategy of the attacker as well as how our response should be. The different phases of the attack chain, you might always see that you would have a lot of your responses built as per this. At each phase of the attack chain, what are your processes? What are the technologies that you're going to use? And how are your people responding to that? A lot of times, one or more of these fail, and then it is only during the attack that we realize that oh, this is something that we did not think of. And as a result of this, the impact of the attack can be much bigger, or the time to contain could also be longer than anticipated, leading to a false sense of security in your peacetime. Uh, we're going to look at the NIST cybersecurity framework. They've put in an excellent amount of work at suggesting what are the different controls, what are the different phases, and what are the different controls that should be a part of your planning and execution when you design your security. And they did come up. So this is now a few years old. They did come up with these 5 phases. So the first one is the identify phase. Over here, you're trying to identify your assets. What are the kind of risks and vulnerabilities that they have? where are they lying, and associated points. The next phase is the protect phase. That's the most natural phase. And over here, the idea is that for the identified assets and for the risks that have been identified, how am I going to protect my systems for the same? There are multiple controls over here which are applicable for this particular phase, and this has been our most natural response. Think of it as a simple asset from day-to-day life as a house. We've identified what are the assets, which could be the family members or any other valuables after that. And then the most natural point or response to an attack is how do we protect the family and how do we protect the set of valuables. So that's the most natural thing. This technology or the technologies and the people and processes under Protect were not found to be sufficient over a period of time. Attackers became intelligent over a period of time, and that is where we came to the detect phase. We realized that it is very unlikely that there would be a blind attack that is happening on it. The person would do some reconnaissance on the asset that is being attacked. And are there any detection controls that are available that I can use during that particular phase so that I can have an early warning of an attack that is taking place and use whatever I learn during that particular period to give me a head start towards my protection technologies. And is it something that can be avoided by having a very strong detection philosophy? These three phases have been the longest running part of security. The thought process was aligned to these three phases. Post that, we came to a point where we realized that the attackers are relentless, the attacks are growing, they are getting more intelligent, they're getting persistent, they may happen over a longer period of time. There is a need to respond to these attacks using a standardized mechanism. Otherwise, any ad hoc mechanism will not give us the right kind of results. That is where we've come in the past couple of years to the respond phase. We realized that we need to have a standardized mechanism. Otherwise, when you actually happen the attack, all your assumptions about a certain person being available, a certain technology being available, a standard operating being procedure gets tested and is found lacking. And it's the wrong time for that to happen. So we've started focusing on the respond part of it, and that is where we will focus on this session. The last one is the recovery. Assuming that the attacker is successful or you are not sure what is the percentage of success of the attacker, how do you recover from that particular situation? Recovery has largely been thought of from an infrastructure and application perspective in the past as a part of the business continuity planning and the disaster recovery scenarios in terms of ensuring that the applications are up, ensuring that the infrastructure to support that applications is up. Organizations have recently realized that during this particular phase, they did not think about security significantly. As a result of that, even while those applications or the corresponding infrastructure is up, they are not necessarily secure, and you are at a heightened risk of operations at that particular period. So these are the five phases as defined by NIST. A lot of organizations across the world have adopted these phases and have attempted to align their security controls according to these particular phases. We'll go ahead and do a blow up of what does NIST say on the incident response lifecycle. So there are these four parts to the incident response lifecycle, and they are preparation, detect and analysis, the containment, eradication, recovery, and post-incident activity. The attempt is to make it into a proper cyclic process where you are spending your efforts and then there is feedback available from the system as well. So the first phase is the preparation. We will touch upon all the four phases over here at a high level. You are attempting to prepare your response strategy and any associated content around that. The next one is the detection and the analysis strategy. So over here, you are during your actual operations, you are attempting to detect an incident that has taken place. You are attempting to do your initial triage and analysis of that particular incident and determining what is going to be your exact response strategy after that. The third Containment is absolutely necessary because your response could take a certain period of time, and during that particular period you do not want the impact of the incident to increase. So you're looking at containing the incident to wherever it occurred, or even reducing it still further, for example isolating a machine if that helps. So you are building a containment strategy which is going to be dependent on the asset and its use, and you are limiting the actual incident that has happened. Post that is the eradication. How do you ensure that the root cause of the incident is eradicated? And finally, how do you ensure that the systems that were impacted or any other auxiliary systems recover from that particular scenario? And then the fast one is your knowledge management, your knowledge sharing, your improvement as a part of your post incident activity. How do you take the knowledge of these incidents or attempt to incident and bring it back to your planning phase and ensure that they get incorporated throughout the life cycle of the incident response? I believe that there are a few questions on the chat. Give me a couple of moments to run through a few slides and we'll get into the responses on those questions. If anybody has got any questions so far, please do continue to post them on chat. We will answer all of them. So as a part of this particular approach, there are certain important questions that organizations have to ask themselves when they're attempting to this approach and ensuring that this works across the organization. So as a part of preparation phase, for example, what is your understanding of your current protection and the detection technologies as a common part of the prevention technologies, and how are you training your users so that they go ahead and they can actually be a part of your security team's strength? How do they detect anything? How do they report anything? So do you have the necessary education life cycle in place so that users, which should be your first line of defense, are an active participant to that? As a part of the detection and analysis, you would see that a lot of tools across the world are now suggesting that they are very intelligent and they can do a analysis or a behavior analysis very easily. The challenge is how do you train them to understand what is normal? And it's a very tough thing to do because during your training process, if they learn the wrong things that are happening in the organization, they assume that to be the normal. And after that, they would not raise that incident when it is actually necessary. Apart from that, during your detection processes, evidence is very important. How do you collect evidence along the way? That evidence is what will help you in terms of your root cause analysis, in terms of your long-term planning, in terms of feedback into the system. And a lot of organizations do assume that the evidence is over there. They do not realize that it may be in temporary phase, it may be in transient memory, it may get overwritten. There may be a humongous amount of that evidence and it may be very difficult to sift through. The next phase, and some questions over there, the containment, eradicate, and recovery. During these phases, depending on the steps, the recovery is the most important and the most difficult one to do. If you have a system that has got impacted in some manner, at times you have to take a decision that are you going to rebuild that particular system or are you going to continue with some patches and fixes? It's a very difficult thing to do. Eradication, if you see an incident that is happening in one part of your organization, how do you go about searching the entire organization for anything similar to that? Think about it in terms of how difficult it is. If you were managing the organizations and let's say you even had 1,000 endpoints and you found something that is around 5 endpoints, would you have the capability to go ahead on the 995 endpoints and find if something similar had happened? What are the kind of steps that you would have to take? So think about, put yourself in that shoes and see if you had to do that and then you had a limited time to do that, then how would you do that? Containment, as we discussed in the past, the addition of assets, the ability to isolate them, at times that is a strategy that you may not be able to use. It may be a web server and an application server and you are in a very critical part of your business and you do not have that as a strategy. So what are alternate controls that you can put it? The last one, I think, while at a theory level this should be the easiest one, you learn a lesson, you spread that across the organization. Very few organizations are very successful this. All of us, and just put yourself in the shoes of the person of the person that has got to do this. And think of normal day to day incidents. How many of us actually pay attention when we sit in an airline to the announcements that are made by the air hostesses? Most of us assume that we know what to do in an emergency and that we would do the right thing and do not want to pay attention to her or him. How many of us, when given an education program, are ready to go through it in detail? All of us do believe that we've got a primary job purpose, which is more important. And all of these are a byproduct, and a little bit knowledge of this is important. And then it's only during that particular crisis that we realize that the necessary information, when not available or not understood, and then the corresponding difficulties that it poses. I'm going to move on from here, from this, and these are some of the questions that we wanted you all to think about. Okay, what are organizations doing in order to do an incident response? Right. Just before we touch that, we're going to look at a security operations maturity roadmap, and then we'll get into what our organizations doing. So we just wanted to cover the whole 9 yards of this before we delve into this further. So most organizations have started off by deploying an SIM. They believe that the detection technology that the SIM offers, which is security incident and event management, which will take in all your logs from across your organizations and then run rules on that to understand what has to be investigated or responded, is the first step. So the SIM is what they've put in. From here, they've chosen different routes to go forward. The first route is increasing the visibility of what you see. This could be done by understanding the network or by user behavior. So this is one route by which organizations have attempted to improve their roadmap. The second one is on the threat landscape. They have attempted to perform or integrate threat intel and perform threat hunting on their own landscape and determine what is the threats that are not being caught by their set of tools and processes. So that's route two. The route three is what we are discussing, which is the response. Organizations have attempted to orchestrate and automate their response. The fourth is on third party integration. As a route, you would see that a lot of tools now offer open APIs and they can integrate with other tools. So you build a comprehensive integrated story where one tool is able to either enrich the capabilities of other tool or share threat intel with another tool. So that's the fourth route where organizations have invested in. Fifth one is about testing their own capabilities. So if you have the security solutions in place, let's say you do an unannounced penetration testing on that particular system, or you do an unannounced DDoS simulation on the system, how do the systems respond? Do the resources or the people that you have, do they detect them? Does the process work in terms of the steps to be followed? Are your technologies correctly configured to be able to detect these particular threats? And the final one is what you would have heard of is cognitive. From an IBM perspective, we've got Watson as a solution. I'm sure people are attempting solutions in that particular space. So these are different ways in which the security operations have responded and have built their roadmaps over a period of time. This does not include process aspects. So for example, you may determine to do an activity every quarter. You may determine to build standard operating procedures and test them and improve them. So parts of it would get done, but then this is largely in terms of a high level roadmap that organizations have gone ahead. So moving forward from here, given these different options, we'll just have a poll for you that's coming up. I'm requesting the team if you all could put up the poll, and as a part of this, okay, you would see a poll that has come up. The time limit of that is 1 minute. If you all could go ahead and put your responses on this particular poll, we'll discuss this for a moment before moving on then. Okay, so we're almost halfway there through the poll. About 25 seconds more to go. And you just think about what is it that matters to the organization the most. You may always do more than one. So until unless you'd say all, then pick one out of these, what you believe is your most important priority. So we got about 5 seconds left, then the poll results should come up. Okay, so the poll has ended. Okay, so from what we see is the majority of the participants are suggesting that the roadmap includes a combination of all of the above, which is very good. I think you're thinking holistically in terms of how the operation should improve. Incident response seems to be second, and threat intel seems to be third. So you all have got what the world is attempting to do over there. So we'll cover on the incident response perspective over here. I think we've not, as a part of this session, attempted to cover the threat determination part. We do hope that we do that at another point of time. Thank you for your responses. I think you all are doing good in terms of the overall thought process, and I'm sure you all will succeed over a period of time. Let's move on. Okay, so some points in terms of how our organization is responding to the incident response. There's individual brilliance. You may always have a champion of incident response across the organization that believes that this is very critical to us at this particular point of time. That person may or may not have the necessary backing of the entire organization. Experience and improve, people would or organizations would want to simulate certain tests, see uh, how they function according to those tests. Now, this could be a tabletop exercise, it could be actual simulation, and they would want to check whether the three aspects of people, process, and technology are good, and what are the scope for improvement. Okay, so tool-based simulation as a byproduct of the experience and improve. The fourth one, tabletop exercise in terms of the experience and improve. And cyber range. So a cyber range is a facility where you can experience a sanitized live breach. So the scenario is created where you can go through a incident, let's say not a breach, it could possibly result to a breach, and you have different team members playing different roles over there as a part of the operations, and you are attempting to respond to that. So this is the closest that you can get to a live scenario, and you can experience that apart from the normal tool based or the tabletop experiences. So it brings everything at one go for you. So this is what some organizations are willing to invest in terms of the experience and a measure of where they are. The last and the most important, the policy and processes based. So a lot of organizations have put in effort to build these policies and processes, and then they go through the different phases in terms of how are they working on these different on the ground as well. Right. If you have any other suggestions, please do put it on the chat window. Happy to share your experience with everybody towards the end of the session. Okay, incident response stakeholders in an organization. I think we normally tend to believe that between the internal and the external incident response stakeholders, the organization typically only looks at the incident response team or the security teams. Some organizations understand, some organizations would not understand at the current moment, and I'm hoping that they see it in the long term that it needs a lot more stakeholders, especially your HR. They need to have policies around incidents, given that a lot of incidents these days could be a result of the insiders. So, what is your response to that? Different department heads, in terms of understanding what is their function as a part of the incident response strategy, what are the activities that they are expected to do. Apart from this, three more, the board. The board is the ultimate responsibility for the corporate. It has got to push incident response and strategy from top to bottom as a part of the overall cybersecurity and cyber resilience framework. The legal teams would have to understand what the incident means to them. A lot of us organizations would be dealing with either consumer data or business data of another entity. Under that particular situation, the legal team becomes absolutely important to have a viewpoint on incidents or on the different kinds of incidents and what it means for the organization and its business and liability over here. Corporate communications. an absolutely necessary thing for them to understand is how do they communicate during this particular period? What are the messages that have to be sent out to different organizations, be it partners, be it law enforcement agencies, be it consumers around that particular incident. From the external perspective, so a couple of stakeholders, there are regulators, they are working on ensuring that organizations report incidents in a specified period of time. Some regulators have gone that mile, some have not gone that mile. Law enforcement agencies, that would be a extended part of the incident response if the nature of the incident demands that, and then finally the media in terms of how are they covering the incident and providing their viewpoints on that. So you would have all seen, for example, the entire story about WhatsApp and Pegasus, where there is a regulator that has got a viewpoint, the law enforcement agency has a viewpoint, and then the media has a viewpoint in terms of what's happened. So that's, I think, the first one that comes to my mind. And then from, if you were a part of Facebook or WhatsApp, you would have different people in your team that were responsible for responding to how this has happened, what exactly has happened, what have you done, what is your policy, and what should your customers expect in the future. Customers. So the last one, your customers, they are the reason why you exist in your business, and they are one of your most important stakeholders. And they do not need to come and give you feedback. They simply choose to take your business away. Going on. Okay, so just one more poll before we move on. This is poll two. Just attempting to understand in your organization what are your incident response stakeholders. This seems to have a shorter time limit of 18 seconds only. We're almost halfway there. Do put in your responses last couple of seconds. Thank you for responding. The poll has ended. I think the results should come up in a bit or so. Okay, so most people have suggested that all of the above are a part of their incident response stakeholders. That's absolutely neat. Uh, the second one comes to the security team. I think by the nature of the business, they bear the brunt of the incidents, and I think it's the time when everybody remembers you. I think most of the year they can forget you, or they may remember you for the wrong reasons. Incidents are possibly when they remember you for the right reasons. There's HR as 10%. And department teams are at a very low 3, legal and board 0, 0. I'm hoping that it is 0 because it got covered in the all of the above. Okay, so let's move on from here. What are the different phases in terms of implementation from your policy to implementation? Okay, so this is run through at a pace. Okay, so the first part is always the definition of the policy and the plan. So the policy covers at a high level, what do you mean by incident response? What are the stakeholders? What are you attempting to do as a part of this incident response? And the plan that is put in place, which goes into more details of the policy. The procedures, which are your standard operating procedures to deal with the normal as well as the abnormal in terms of incidents. The IR team or the incident response team, now this would vary across different organizations. Some of them would have a team that is dedicated to this. Some of them would have a hybrid team where you've got dedicated resources and additional users picking up responsibilities only during the incident. And finally, the training and knowledge sharing that you would want to do so that the users are a part of your response. Now, some more steps in terms of the simulation post the training and knowledge sharing that you would want to do and check in terms of how is the entire policy to the training working or not. The simulation, as we covered in the past, what our organization is doing, there are tabletop exercises. So a tabletop exercise is where you've got different stakeholders that are coming in, you're playing out a particular scenario, and they are suggesting what are they going to do as a part of that particular scenario. It's used as an effective mechanism as the first step for multiple stakeholders to understand what is their role when an incident happens. The next one is on the IR tool. The tool itself, if you have made that choice to invest in a particular tool to standardize your incident responses. The next one is always an emergency response. So most organizations may or may not have the capability to deal with all possible incidents. So they've gone ahead and invested in a consultant that provides responses only during an emergency and helps them out only during an emergency. The last one, as we discussed, cyber range, where you experience the actual incident and you see if you are get or what are you doing during that and if you are getting better. So these are different steps, and you would want that the vertical steps are feeding back into the horizontal steps. So the entire exercise of tabletop is leading to changes across the policy to training so that you realize that there's a gap that you've been able to identify. Similarly, using your tools and the other services, you are going back and you're feeding your policies, plan, procedures, IR teams to get better as time improves. Okay, incident management operations and mapping it to NIST. This is a very high level blow up of what you would typically expect when you are actually investigating using a particular tool, right? So the stages of NIST at the top. Now, what are the different sources or the input sources to your incident response tool? The first source would be your security incident and event management tool. It is a tool that organizations would invest in that has got the capability to collect what is happening across the organization, run rules, and raise potential incidents, and you would feed that into your incident for it to be investigated. A second mechanism is for a threat intelligence tool. So if you have a threat intelligence platform or you have threat intel and you would see, let's say, either an observable that has happened across the world or a particular indicator of compromise, you would want to determine how are you going to respond to that across the enterprise. The third could either be a user input. You may have multiple security tools that are directly talking to this incident response tool at the center directly, and they do not want to come in via these SIM. So they would want to talk directly and raise an incident because you believe that going via the SIM is either time consuming, you have not got the necessary use cases in place for it to come via a intermediate tool, and you prefer the direct integration. What the incident response tool would do is it would attempt to enrich the incident first, and it can do that by connecting to different solutions. One example is an AD solution, so that if you get some usernames, you can go back, identify certain more details about the user. Similarly, your asset management database, or what is commonly called as the CMDB. So you may want to go ahead, understand the priorities of those particular assets. A third one could be that you would want to go to the threat intel tool, share some information and see if it is worth more than that. There are certain solutions in the market that have got a risk scoring mechanism. So over here, while you feed in certain input data over there and you give it certain amount of logic, it gives you a risk score. So if you want to integrate with a risk score tool and get necessary risk to enrich your incident. These tools have also invested over a period of time to integrate with sandboxes. So if you have an advanced persistent threat determination tool, then the incident response tool could send in, for example, let's say a file to the sandbox tool and request for an opinion on that particular tool. And as a part of this, you are getting additional enrichment or confirmation that is the document that was sent to you as a part of the entire incident. Was it malicious or not? So you may have this particular integration. Post this, you would have integration with the necessary collaboration tools. So you may have an ITSM tool, which is your standard service management tool that you're using for the entire organization. You may have to mail out to different users. So you may have an email integration. And finally, if there is a confirmation of the incident or certain action that has got to be taken, even without an incident, if it's just a threat intel and you want to take action on that, you may orchestrate that to your different security tools, be it the firewall, intrusion preventions, proxy solutions. So there may be multiple solutions that you may want to orchestrate or automate to, and let it know that these are the things that they should do as a part of this. This is what you would expect from a standard tool. There are additional features that have got built over a period of time. And there are dynamic playbooks. So the playbook covers the input source. This is what I see. This is the different steps that I would take. Out of these, some of them I will orchestrate, some of them I will automate. By orchestration, I mean that I'm waiting for a human input, and by automate, I'm directly integrating via an API. And this is how I will collaborate with different people and how I will orchestrate. So, as a part of the playbook, a common one is, for example, malware analysis. You may have phishing incidents, so you build a playbook for that, and you'll build them to be dynamic depending on the kind of inputs that you get. You could adjust the appropriate level of priorities of that incident, as well as you could determine if it needs a faster response. Let's say if it involves somebody senior in the organization and that asset is at critical risk. So these are built to be dynamic and change as per the different inputs that it receives. There are other features that are there. You would definitely need a case management to be a part of this. You would want to be able to investigate every incident as a case, attach any artifacts that you've discovered during that particular investigation, write notes so that you can collaborate with the larger entity. You would have analytics for a particular incident, how many of those incidents have happened during an X period of time. So that's a simple analytics. What are the different sources that have been involved with this incident? And you would also get, okay, what's been your mean time to respond to a particular incident, and another set of analytics of this kind. Escalation is absolutely necessary. Incident response has to happen within a particular period of time. So you would want to escalate the incident if there is no response available during a particular set of time. So you would have a feature where you can go higher than this. Metrics, as we said, some of the analytics could finally be converted into metrics for you to determine if the incident response is getting better over a period of time. And then the visualization and the reports. So you would find a lot of incident response tools now have visualization capability for their reports. They also have a visualization capability for you to build your playbooks. So you can drag and drop pieces, you can connect them directly, which ensures that you have to write very little code in order to build a workflow for your incident response. So this is using a tool, the incident response operations at a very high level. If you have any questions on this slide, please go ahead, post them. We'll get to the questions. We've got poll for you. This is the next one, poll 3, and it is about the kind of playbooks that you've built. And we're just seeking to understand what's been the approach that all of you all have used to build your playbooks. The poll is for approximately 1 minute. We are down by about 15 seconds. Shikumar, apologies if you don't see the poll, it should pop up. We've got 4 options. First one is that you're not using playbooks at all. You have converted some of your operational methodology to a procedure and you believe that is how you should be. You faced an incident and you decided that I will build playbooks across the enterprise. And the last one is on the basis of what's generated in the SIM and the use cases that are generated in the SIM, I'm building some playbooks. So approximately 10 seconds left. Please share your responses. We're just about time and the poll has ended. Okay, so more than 1/3 of the response suggests that there are no playbooks that are being used so far. The next set, which is about 1/4 of the total set of responses that we received, are suggesting that they've built procedures over a period of time, used by understanding what was their mechanism using and using whatever was documented or an informal way of working. Some of you all, that is approximately 1/6, have suggested that there is a minimum set that is built post an incident. So there was an incident, possibly to respond to that incident and to prevent the incident from happening again. Certain playbooks have been built. The last one, which is about 1/4, is about using the SIM and using the use cases of the SIM and building an incident response. So I think that I think the previous two polls did have a lot better results in terms of where we were on the incident response journey. With this poll, I think there's a lot that needs to be done. Do evaluate playbooks as a standard incident response mechanism. The playbook would contain what are the kind of inputs, what are the kind of steps that you would use to evaluate, what is the collaboration or the stakeholders that with whom you have to collect evidence or suggest additional checks to be done, and finally how do you orchestrate. So playbooks are a great way of working. Do adopt them, and we're always available if you would want IBM to help you on that journey. We're always available to help you on this particular journey in terms of adoption of an IR tool and adoption of playbooks. Okay, let's move forward. So incident response tool and the part that it plays in the whole incident response journey. I am covering the IBM tool over here. There are similar tools in the market. I do believe that we've got one of the best tools in the market, and we are covering this. Siva, so hold on, Siva, please. Okay, so you would have seen most of this on the previous slides in terms of the incident response operations. As a part of your incident response tool, you're looking out for certain features. The first one is the capability to orchestrate, which is creating a workflow where you would have human beings interact and suggest the way forward, and you're using human intel over there. Automation, where you believe that this is a scenario where my response is going to be the same every time, and you have used APIs and you're integrating directly with the tools. You would expect AI and human intelligence to be there as a part of the tool and used. And then finally, case management. So case management is absolutely necessary. I think of it in terms of how is the police investigating as of today. So you file an FIR, it gets converted into a case. Whatever is investigated, whatever is searched, whatever they have seen, evidence collected, everything goes as a part of that case. So it gives you a complete history of what has happened at what time, what were the different people involved, who was the person investigating, so that at any later point of time, you could go back and you could go through that entire cycle and see what was happened, was the process correctly, did we miss anything. So case management is absolutely critical as a part of any kind of incident response strategy that you build. Okay, so we've got some features of the tool, and this is, I think we covered most of this. So you would want the capability to ingest incidents, escalate them. You would want to build playbooks that are dynamic in nature, ensure that case management exists. You can collaborate. Metrics are available so that you can demonstrate are you getting better over a period of time. So some of the standard features that you would want from an incident response tool. The orchestration ecosystem, you would want integration with different tools. Every organization would have its own choice in terms of, let's say, the firewall tools that they have, the patch management solutions that they have, the proxies. So with all of these tools, you need to have the capability to make them a part of your orchestration and automation strategy. Every incident response tool would have worked on a different set of integration. You would want to evaluate what are the out of the box integrations so that you know that if there's an incident where these tools have to act upon. So, for example, an indicator of compromise, and you do not want to manually go back and add that into your firewall and into your proxy and into your EDR. So, you would want that capability. But if your proxy is not supported by the incident response tool, then you either have to be able to lump that somehow or go and write that. So, you would want to do some of these valuations when you are looking at the incident response tool. How many of your security tools does it support out of the box? Finally, the AI and the human intelligence. So you would want, or rather, everybody would want AI and ML to be part of every tool as far as possible to be able to extract, assuming that is applicable for that particular scenario. But apart from that, you would want certain threat intelligence integration. You would want automated enrichment that happens, you would want the tool to look at old incidents that have happened, that have been recorded in the tool, and be able to correlate against those incidents and help build patterns for you. So some of the features that you would want out of a tool. Right? So moving on, I think I'm just going to skip through a couple of slides on the tool. Okay, this is a visual of how you can build playbooks. And these playbooks are built using drag and drop functionality. And you can create playbooks that will run in parallel. They could run sequentially. And you would want all of these steps to be performed before you arrive at your incident response analysis. It gives you a standard mechanism. As an example, let's say if one of the users in your organization has got a malware on your machine, you would want that to be investigated in the same manner every time there's a malware found on an endpoint. You would want to put down certain steps. You would want to understand how do you check against the entire organization assets for the presence of the malware being found anywhere else. So you would have these different things that you would want to do. You would want to build a playbook for that. And then this is the visual aspect of building a playbook, which ensures that you have got a standardized response to that particular incident. Okay, these are some of the integrations that we support out of the box across multiple technologies so that if you're using one of them, the response can be automated. We're just going to run through the next 5 minutes on incident response services, and then we'll get into the question and answers that have been posed on this. IBM as a part of this. Okay, Manish, Manish, if you I cannot
Yeah, yeah,
more.
Harjinder, please tell me.
No, no, so I'm just looking out for, okay, Manish, you had a question.
Yeah. So he's asking you to go to the previous slide
Yeah, so
and
I've gone to this previous slide, Manish, but in the interest of time, let's revisit this at the end, Manish. Just give me another 5 more minutes to be able to cover the incident response services. Yeah, and do that. Okay, incident response services. So what we realized as an organization is that when you're working with our organizations, you may not have the same skill across all organizations or the same skill set we can deploy across all organizations. A lot of organizations would want shared services, would want remote services, and at that point of time, the incident response capability could take a hit. At times, there are incidents that are based on newer attacks in the market, and then the teams on the ground may not be capable to always handle the latest attacks or the latest threat vectors in the market. And then we put a global team together that does incident response for the living. This is called as IBM X-Force, and then they've got multiple services under this. So the under the branding of X-Force, it's called IRIS, which stands for Incident Response and Intelligence Services. We've got multiple programs over here and multiple activities that they do. I'll just cover some of them in brief. So the first one is an assessment of your incident response program itself. Do you have a program that does this? What is the maturity level of that particular program? And how good will it function when you actually see an incident? And the idea is to build a roadmap at the end so that you can improve your incident response program. The second one is about playbooks. How do we build playbooks to deal with an incident? And apart from this, think about it in this manner. I may have a playbook to deal with a ransomware. I may not be able to decrypt the actual code that is encrypted your machine. Under that, my response could be to have a backup of that particular data. And this is things that come in from experience, from building playbooks. You have to accept that at certain point in time, your response strategy may or may not work. And at that point of time, have you invested in the alternative? That is what we're very good at, building these playbooks and incorporating auxiliary solutions to be able to deal with certain incidents where the normal will not work. The third one is a tabletop exercise, as we discussed, sitting along with stakeholders and determining whether they understand how to perform in an incident. Do they have, and this is like a theory and hence a simulation, it does not lead to the same pressure as what you may face during the incident, but determining that they are able to do that, or are you simply forcing them to think? Are there situations that they never thought of in the past that may impact their business? And you would not want this to happen during the actual incident. So this is the practice before you go and play the match. The last one, in terms of the actual reactive, this one is reactive. Assuming you get breached, assuming you get hacked, there's a toll-free number. There are people available 24 by 7. You can call them up. They will run you through the incident. For certain countries, we would have people on site. For some countries, it will purely be a remote service, and they will guide you through the collaboration channels in terms of how do you respond to the incident. There are certain proactive services that you can utilize. One of them is active threat assessment, the ability to come ahead, deploy certain endpoint detection and response solutions, and detect if you have a potential time bomb sitting in your environment. There is the entire incident response planning services, the whole service that we covered on the previous slides. There are a couple of more services that we offer over here, right? And we've not covered all of them given the paucity of time over here. This is one more about the strategic threat assessment. And over here, we are going through different stages at different levels of maturity and helping you prepare by determining your threat at the different levels of maturity. Okay, the last one, this is the cyber range that we have. We've built a cyber range. We are putting in our best to take this to other countries across the world. And over here, you can see a live fire environment and see, are you up to it to be able to deal that in that moment? Okay, so the last poll, after that, we'll open it up for questions. We've got a minute on this and it trying to understand how are you proactively dealing with incident response. So are you sharing incidents? Are you using red and blue teams? Do you have an incident response planning, or is it something that you still need to work on? I have about, we're down about 25 seconds, have about half a minute to respond to these. Okay, last 10 seconds. Okay, so that's time up. That was our final poll. So, so a lot of you all have suggested that there is a detailed incident response planning that you all have already done. Knowledge sharing takes in the second spot, and then a few of you have either suggested that you are simulating attacks and validating whether the incident response actually works, or you have not been able to invest in this particular philosophy so far, right? So a majority of you all have suggested that there's a detailed incident response planning, right? So looking at this response in the previous one, I think do look at playbooks as a mechanism to standardize that. Do look at tools that can help you orchestrate and respond to these particular incidents. Okay, so let's just go through the chat window for the questions and we will respond to all of them. We've got some 5 minutes more on the session. Please put down your questions if you have any.
Thanks, Harjinder, for those insights. A lot to know about incident response. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you, Harjinder. So we could see that there are a couple of questions over the chat window, like risk assessment quarterly will help in containment and recovery, and how to eradicate and recovery, whether it would happen automatically. So if you can just respond to all of these, and
Sure,
then
I'll
we
do that.
can, yeah, thanks.
Right. So I've got the first one, which is interesting. What is the first step if a system is infected? What is the percentage of recovering? Okay, so I think you need to look at it holistically in terms of different incidents that are responsible. In terms of this one, do you have a mechanism by which you can determine the security level of an endpoint. So if the organization determines a security posture for the endpoint, then is there a mechanism for you to be able to run that at that moment? The next, and let's say share that results with the incident response team that this is the security posture of my endpoint, my patching level, my compliance to different applications that are there. The next step should definitely be to isolate that particular endpoint from the environment so that you do not become a source of the infection to spread over there. And post that, the incident response team will guide you through additional steps in terms of can you do this, can you check this. They would go through their own logs, they would look at multiple security solutions and move forward from there. So this is a classic case and something that most organizations experience. Running an antivirus is one of the toughest things in the world, and it's highly underestimated. The fact that people move, signatures do not get updated at times for days together, they do not understand the harmful effect of connecting to free Wi-Fi's or the other challenges that you would normally face with endpoints when they are, let's say, not used in the right manner. And you need to have a response mechanism that is standardized for them. Right. I hope, Sunil, that answers the question that you have. Okay, risk assessment, Seva Janaswamy, risk assessment quarterly will help in containment and recovery. I think so. I just think that you should add some amount of tabletop exercises, even if you want to do it half yearly with stakeholders, and some simulation that you would want to do at least once a year so that you can check the strength of the documented processes and the tools and technologies that you've invested in. Okay, Sukhbir, eradicate and recovery. So recovery is one of the toughest things that you can ever do, and do it automatically is much more difficult than actually suggested. Eradication, a lot of technologies do offer the capability to, at least for some things, for example, a hash that you get. So the ability to search that across the entire enterprise by talking to different EDR solutions and determining if it exists. So for some of the incidents, you may be able to eradicate at least the part that will prevent it from spreading further. But it's much more tougher than what normally people believe, the ability to eradicate. Very few of us have got, let's say, central systems that can easily talk to an endpoint and determine its compliance, determine any malware that are present, and the ability to take action on that. ITL framework, good point, Charan. Apologies, Srikumar, I hope that you got the poll. Playbooks. So playbooks are what we build for our customers as we take them through this journey of incident response. There would be standard categories for playbooks. So for example, phishing, malware. I'm sure that do contact us and we'll be more than happy to help on this. Manish, do let me know if you still need me to go to the previous slide. I can still go back, or rather, let me just put the previous slide over there so that I can take the remaining questions on that while you think about anything that you want us to cover. Manish, I hope that the slide was helpful. I've put it up again. Okay, Akshay, we got your email address. How you go about operational technology. Interesting, Srikumar. Let me just go through all the questions. This is the answer for this is bigger and possibly taken offline. But the idea is at operational technology, the main challenge is that the people that have built the technology were not necessarily the best proponents of security when they decided to build that technology. So there are solutions that can help you get visibility. Some of them integrate into the SIEM. So for example, there's an intermediate solution that translates the OT to the IT part or similar to IT alerts. And then they give you the alerts. The response over there is still more tougher to do, given that some of these technologies would not have an open API for you to go back. What you can do, however, is build your playbooks in terms of how you want to collect evidence, how you want to investigate, and then decide in terms of is there a capability to orchestrate. So some of those solutions, for example, the Nozomis and checkpoints of the world have built solutions for OT, and they may offer an compensatory control for incident response. And it may still leave certain points for manual intervention. Kumar, we can discuss this offline. this is a much bigger topic than what I can cover on this. Conver, apologies if you could not fulfill your survey. Will you cover all the process of C-risk? Not the intention for today. Apologies, Raswinder. Right, Srikumar again, OT. So OT is a bigger one. Do you have a common template for documenting the incident response? I do tend to, if you were to believe that the organization has built a policy and a process and procedures, I do look at playbooks as one of the most important things in terms of the incident response, and that is what you should be documenting. The different input sources, how will you enrich that particular incident? What part of it can be automated? What part of it needs you to reach out to an administrator and collect evidence? And then how do you collaborate and orchestrate? So I think you should look at playbooks as a standard template for documenting your incident response. Okay. Okay, while you can do some simulation IT systems, can you simulate an OT system? I think simulation is normally the easier part. You would find tools that can do some amount of simulation, and there would be tools that can do the detection. I think it's the protection of OT systems where you're dependent on a lot of compensatory controls to be able to help you out with. Okay, can it be shared? That is something that I'm the speaker for this. I do not know how do we share this to everybody, but I do hope that Times would have an answer to that. Okay, Akshay,
Yes. Okay. Please.
Krishna.
Yeah. Harjinder, you can go ahead with your answers, and I would respond to that later on
Sure.
offline. Yeah.
Sure. So, which standards are to be followed for cybersecurity solution implementation? I think it's not a matter of standards. I think do define your overall policy and framework. So, if you believe that NIST is good, and most of us across the world believe that NIST is a very good standard, use that as your base framework. Look at the different controls that NIST offers and the control objectives. Map the different solutions that you have to that. You would get a very easy gap assessment. Right now, what it cannot tell you is the maturity of that integration, for example. It can only tell you whether you have, and it may have some qualifying questions. But I think NIST, the cybersecurity framework that we covered at the beginning, is a very good starting point for you to begin your cybersecurity implementation journey. The other one, from an architecture perspective, I think look at Open Group. They've got a very decent architecture. There has been times in my life when I've attempted to draw something of that kind, and once I saw that, I thought that this is what I was looking for. So it tells you how do you start from your business, your threats, your compliance, how do you go on to policies, principles, which form the backbone of the organization from there, your standards, guidelines, your architecture, your vulnerabilities, your incidents, and then how does it loop back. So look at the open group architecture, absolutely good. Look at NIST as a framework for mapping of your controls to your cybersecurity implementation. These are the two suggestions that I would have for you. Right. I think we are over time, and if you have any further questions, keep putting it on. So I'm here. Okay, so do you have any maturity matrix level to benchmark cybersecurity? So we do have that. I think a few organizations in the market would have a maturity matrix level. Now, each of them would have their own mechanism. And what we do follow is we've built something internally, which is called 10 essential practices that help you do that. And we do it against 10 security controls. Then there is also the niche framework, and you can do a maturity assessment on that as well. Right. Krishna, so over to you. If I see any more questions, I'll respond to them, but over to you in terms of how you want to take this forward from here. Krishna, if you're there. Okay. Thank you, everybody. If you have any questions, just keep putting them on till the session does not come to an end. Otherwise, Krishna, Naveen, for you all to take this forward from here.
Yeah, Harjinder, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Harjinder.
Okay, thank you, Manish.
Yeah. So you can write your queries to krishna.mukherjee@timesgroup.com if you want to connect with IBM speaker. And also share your tech thoughts for 2020, what comes to your mind as we start a new beginning with the new year. On behalf of Economic Times, I would like to thank all the participants for joining this webinar. Once you log off, automatically a window will open to capture your feedback. Your feedback is very important for us. Please fill in as detailed as possible. Thank you again for joining the Economic Times live webinar powered by IBM. Thank you.